So let's go into the next change, which are elephant changes. The elephant changes include elephants dealing less damage to each other and spears dealing more damage to elephants. What are your thoughts, guys?
Well, I guess. Go ahead, Shlomi.
Yes, Shlomi,
Okay.
go first.
Well, I'm always for an elephant nerf, because with single entity units, it's always hard to balance. Because unless the elephant is dead, it deals full damage. So I think they can do a bit more. They're maybe still a bit too mobile, in my opinion.
Foxy?
Yeah, I guess they are too mobile actually. Like I don't really care about their armor that they have, and I don't really care about the damage that they deal because it's quite predictable. It only gets complicated if the elephants are stacked. So maybe increase their hitboxes for against each other, so that they can't like gang up on one single spot. But in general, they're really fast. Like if they stampede, for example, they can dash quite a long distance actually. So I guess that's why it's hard for javelins at the moment to really counter elephants as well, because they're more focused on running away from the elephant and actually engaging them and slowing them down to apply pressure. And that's, I think, the biggest issue right now. Like they have quite a bit of armor and HP and stuff like that, but there are quite a lot of units which could kill an elephant, like Germanicus on medium infantry, for example, or foxes or barbarian swords. Even cavalry can deal quite a lot of damage, but elephants ganging up and their mobility is just a really big problem, I guess.
True. I overall agree with the general gist that elephants are OP. And I find speed as a very interesting balancing factor in their case. We know it has been tweaked in the past in regard of the projectiles slowing them down, of how much when you shoot at them, they start to weigh down on them and elephants actually get slower. But yeah, javelins are supposed to be one of the best counters to elephants, but because of elephant speed and ability to push for units, well, even if javelins gang up on elephants with another player with infantry that can stop them to some extent, that infantry is not going to stop them forever, and elephants are just going to walk through infantry, start chasing the javelins, and javelins won't be able to shoot because if they start shooting, they will be caught. And infantry just keeps chasing the elephants, and yeah, that's just not a good state of the game in regards of elephants, I believe. So yeah, they definitely look into that rather than just the damage numbers alone. But also an interesting thing to look at here is that they lower the damage that elephants deal to themselves. So overall, I agree with the, let's say, design ideology that the units themselves shouldn't be the best counters to also themselves, right? So elephant shouldn't be the best counter to elephant, a ranged unit shouldn't be the best counter to a ranged unit, and artillery shouldn't be the best counter to artillery, which sadly quite very often actually is the case. So the CA should take steps towards fixing that kind of situation. And in terms of elephants, well, that's quite easy, just lower the damage that elephants deal to each other. And for example, in terms of ranged units, they could just give them loose formation, so then when ranged units shoot each other, they will also naturally just deal less damage to each other. So I think those sort of changes definitely improve the overall health of the game, and I like to see more steps in that direction overall, not just for elephants. Anyone else want to chip on the topic? George?
Yeah, I think elephants are definitely a challenging one, because when you talk about mobility, obviously it is essentially a mounted unit, if that makes any sense. You know, it's going to be faster than your average infantryman. You know, I dare say that none of us could outrun an elephant, and so I think with the mobility, it's probably best to tweak around their sort of special abilities, like what Falx touched on with the Stampede. And also going back to what Shlomi said about it being a single unit, I do agree that makes things very difficult to balance because, like you said, full HP, 1 HP still does the same amount of damage. And even with infantry, obviously, say you're in a spear phalanx, not all your men can be on that front line. So, to be honest, what is the damage potential of most other units? You know, if you're fighting in just a one-on-one engagement of infantry, you know, not all your men are fighting at once. You're lacking some of that damage potential. Is locked in those like rear ranks. Whereas with an elephant, it's all there. It's all, you know, it's either everything or nothing. And so that is difficult to balance because it feels like if you tweak it one way or the other, it does become all or nothing. You know, I do agree that elephants are overpowered, but I wouldn't want to see them get to a state where they're useless and no one ever plays them. You know, I think there should always be a place for every unit.
Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of units have went, you know, through the cycles of buffing and nerfing, where one patch they're super strong and the other patch they're suddenly super weak, and CA have struggled to, you know, balance those things, you know, the right way, find a sweet spot. But after many patches, they actually managed to find it. After all, for most of those units, and yeah, it's still ever-going balancing process that is never going to stop because of all the changes that come into the game. You know, new factions, new mechanics, and in the light of the new game mode, right, also a lot of balance changes. Well, they change, the balance overall changes. Just like now, elephants got huge buff in this new game mode, right, because of how important contesting points is, and elephants are absolutely great at doing that. Asafa?
I was gonna say, I think they're gonna have to be creative with how they balance elephants if they want them to never, you know, outshine other units and yet not be useless. Because I agree with George. I mean, elephants were a huge part of Carthage's image back then. They weren't, you know, they weren't as common as a lot of people think, but they were a huge part of their image, and they should be in the game. They have a place in the game, and so they shouldn't be useless. But at the same time, there are definite units that are a lot better at killing them, like Falk said, Vengeance Germanicus, you know, an Ad Portus infantry, pretty much anything that can spike its weapon damage to the moon. And then, so I was thinking a more interesting way you could do it, instead of changing the damage numbers around a lot, and this would help with javelins too, is you could mess with the forced march because it reduces their morale. And I think you could maybe try and balance elephants through morale. If they want to move at that higher speed to chase down javelins, which are supposed to be a counter, then they have to sacrifice some morale. And then infantry, if they're attacking them, could proc a rear flank. Don't make it as extreme as infantry because it's an elephant, obviously. But if you
cannot
have
flank
march,
an elephant.
True, that's what I'm saying. Is that if you had forced march on and you flanked it and it routed,
no, I
that
mean,
might be a
it's
way
literally
balancing.
impossible in the game to flank an elephant. Just flanks don't apply to an elephant, unless they would introduce a change where you can actually flank an elephant.
That's what I'm saying. Is like they're gonna have to think out of the box if they want the elephant to
be able
not
to
be
flank
above other things or be below other things. I'm not saying specifically that. I'm saying that's one way you could handle it, right? Is if the elephant chooses to run past your infantry to get to the range, it should be punished like every other unit. I can't just take my cavalry and pull through an infantry unit without getting my health bar decimated or my morale broken.
True. Also, let's just get something out there, that elephants were and still are one of the top unit types in the game, and they have been since they were released. So if they suddenly were below average, I think it would be, well, just fair, even, you know, if they just got a little bit over nerfed. Obviously you never want to over nerf something, right? And you want it to be in the sweet spot, but overall the game wouldn't suffer, and the Elephants players also wouldn't suffer that much, right? Because you've been top dogs for so much time. Your crown is not going to fall off if you suddenly be a little bit less useful than you used to be, less OP. And
to be honest,
it also would feel frustrating, right, for other people who don't play elephants and they play something else, and it's like, oh, these elephants are always so OP. When is my time to shine? Foxy?
I was just thinking about like an out-of-the-box solution, basically. Like, not to derail here, but we can just add like another system basically to the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Foxy,
we know
okay.
elephants-
I think we are a little bit derailing already. So
Okay.
I would like to move on. I'm sorry. I know that for the sake of the length of this podcast, let's move on slowly.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
No worries, man.
I wanted to touch onto... We didn't even really get to the bonus damage for spears, right? But okay, quickly, let's say that I think that spears still kind of suck against elephants, and that bonus damage is not going to help.